In the heart of West Africa, beneath the calm blue waters of the Atlantic, lies the pulse of a continent's power oil. For decades, this black gold flowed through pipelines and ports under deals signed in Washington, Houston, and London. But in 2025, something historic is happening, for the first time in modern history. Africa is turning its oil wealth against the West. Once, the United States dominated Africa's energy market. From Nigeria to Angola, from Equatorial Guinea to Ghana, U.S. oil giants shaped economies, influenced politics, and built an empire of extraction. But now that empire is collapsing, and it's not just about oil, it's about revenge, independence, and power. In 2008, the U.S. imported nearly a fifth of its crude oil from Africa. By 2025, that number has dropped to almost zero. Why? Because America discovered its own oil at home. The shale revolution made U.S. energy companies rich, but it also made Africa feel abandoned. When American buyers walked away, African producers were left holding the barrel, billions in infrastructure projects, decades of trade relationships gone. Washington's new energy independence didn't just change markets. It changed alliances, and into that vacuum stepped new players: China, Russia, India, and the Gulf states. They didn't come with lectures about democracy or human rights. They came with money, respect, and deals. No questions asked. For African leaders tired of Western conditions and interference, it was irresistible. And so began what many now call Africa's oil revenge. This revenge didn't start with weapons, it started with contracts. African governments began tearing up old agreements written decades ago under U.S. influence. They demanded local ownership, higher royalties, and new refineries built on African soil. And when U.S. oil firms refused, African nations turned to others. Russia's Rosneft, China's Nuke, even Brazil and Turkey stepped in to fill the gap. Suddenly, the American century in African energy was replaced by a multipolar scramble for oil. For decades, we exported crude and imported poverty. Now we're taking control of our own resources. Across West Africa, the mood is changing. This is no longer about aid or dependency. It's about sovereignty and economic revenge. From Abuja to Luanda, governments are nationalizing projects once controlled by Western firms. New oil contracts are being written in yuan and rubles, not dollars. And the message is clear. If the U.S. no longer needs African oil, Africa no longer needs the U.S. for many Africans. This oil revenge isn't just political, it's personal. Decades of pollution, corruption, and inequality have fueled resentment toward Western energy giants. In Nigeria, communities once promised wealth now live amid oil spills and gas flares. In Equatorial Guinea, billions in profits left the continent while citizens remained in poverty. To them, the U.S. isn't just a superpower, it's a symbol of exploitation. But the new Africa has learned to play the game differently. Through organizations like the African Continental Free Trade Area (AfCFTA), countries are building regional energy networks, pipelines, refineries, and ports that connect them to one another, not just to the West. The goal is simple: keep African oil in African hands. And this time, the movement is coordinated from Senegal's gas fields to Angola's offshore rigs. Even traditional U.S. allies like Ghana and Nigeria are signing deals with China's energy banks and Russia's Lukoil. Follow the tankers, and you'll see the new world order emerging. Crude once shipped to Texas now sails east to Shanghai. West Africa's oil is fueling Beijing's factories, Moscow's war machine, and India's growing economy. Meanwhile, U.S. officials warn of geopolitical risks. But for Africa, this is payback. For decades, Washington dictated the rules. Now Africa is rewriting them. America's message was always the same: we're partners. But too many Africans, it felt more like ownership. Aid came with strings, trade came with terms, and when Africa wanted independence, Washington offered advice, not investment. Today, that relationship has flipped. U.S. diplomats are flying across West Africa trying to secure new energy access, but the doors that once opened instantly now stay close. We no longer need permission to trade our oil. Africa will decide who benefits from Africa's resources. Those words broadcast from Johannesburg to Washington echo the new mood of defiance. It's not isolation, it's liberation. Africa's oil isn't just a commodity anymore. It's a weapon of influence, and the United States, once the continent's most powerful partner, now finds itself locked out of the energy game it built. Some call it revenge, others call it justice. Either way, Africa's oil is no longer America's to take. The balance of power has shifted quietly, but irreversibly. In the deserts of Niger, in the deltas of Nigeria, in the deep waters of Angola, a new alliance is forming, and at its heart lies a simple truth: control the oil, control the future. The age of American oil in Africa is over. The question now Is who owns what comes next? Africa's oil revenge? Why the US is no longer welcome in West Africa's energy market? For nearly half a century, one nation stood at the center of the global oil network. Its corporations were household names, its engineers trained others, its capital built pipelines, and its influence shaped the price of fuel in every corner of the world. But in less than 2 decades, that dominance unraveled, and the story of how it happened begins not abroad but at home. When domestic engineers unlocked a new way to extract oil from rock formations, the nation celebrated what it called energy independence. Within years, production surged beyond expectations. The once importing superpower became the world's leading exporter of crude. To policymakers, it looked like freedom, no more reliance on faraway suppliers, but to those suppliers, it felt like abandonment. Tankers that once crossed oceans no longer arrived, contracts disappeared, economies built around the old demand began to crumble almost overnight. Oil that once had a guaranteed buyer suddenly needed a new destination, and fast. As the old buyers stepped back, new ones moved in. Emerging powers offered loans for infrastructure, roads, refineries, pipelines paid not in cash, but in future shipments of crude. Other developing nations quietly became major customers. Even mid-sized economies saw opportunity and joined the race. For the first time in decades, producers had options. They no longer needed to sell through intermediaries or price their oil in a single dominant currency. Resources once controlled by distant interests became powerful bargaining chips in a crowded marketplace. But as trade shifted eastward and southward, influence from the west kept fading. Oil giants from the old power centers faced a dilemma. Operating costs were high, regulations were uncertain, and local governments demanded a greater share of the profits. Projects that once guaranteed immense returns no longer satisfied investors. Withdrawals began quietly, first in a few fields, then across entire regions. Each exit left space for new alliances and new narratives. Where one side saw declining profitability, the other saw a chance to redefine decades of unequal partnership. Across the continent, governments began asserting control over their own natural resources. They introduced local content laws, established state-run energy enterprises, and built domestic refineries to end dependence on imported fuel. These changes were more than policy, they were expressions of identity. After generations of exporting raw crude and importing refined products, nations wanted ownership of the full value chain. The message to foreign investors was unmistakable. Some adapted, most didn't. While corporations reduced their presence abroad, the policymakers of the old superpower turned their attention elsewhere. The spotlight moved to new strategic arenas. The transformation of the energy landscape in the global South, complex, rapid, and politically sensitive, was largely ignored. By the time awareness caught up, the change was irreversible. New powers had financed refineries, built pipelines, and secured long-term access. Partnerships once defined by one side's dominance were now reshaped by others' investments. For many communities, the old power's withdrawal felt familiar. They remembered when outside demand dictated local prosperity and when price crashes destroyed livelihoods. Now, as markets rise again, those same regions want a different ending. Revenues are being reinvested in transport, energy, and digital infrastructure. Sovereign funds are being used to stabilize budgets and fuel long-term growth. Challenges remain, but the ambition is unmistakable: to turn oil into a foundation for independence, not dependency. In this environment, moral lectures about transparency and reform ring less loudly than before. Leaders across the region are asking a new question: if they no longer need our oil, why should we need their permission? Another factor hastened the decline of influence: environmental politics. As governments of the old power turned toward renewable energy and pledged to reduce carbon emissions, investing in overseas oil became politically risky. Development banks withdrew support for fossil projects, and investors sought greener portfolios. But for developing producers, oil remains the backbone of progress. Export revenue funds schools, hospitals, and public infrastructure. When richer nations discouraged fossil investment, poorer ones called it hypocrisy. Prospering for centuries on carbon, then closing the door behind them, the divide was no longer just economic, it was philosophical. By the mid-2020s, diplomatic missions returned to the region, promising renewed partnerships. But the meetings were smaller, the leverage thinner, proposals centered on sustainability and governance-worthy goals, yet overshadowed by immediate investments from other corners of the world. The region listened. Then it signed the deals that built its refineries, its pipelines, its power grids. The image of a departing oil platform became a symbol of a wider retreat. To older generations, it marked the end of an era. To younger ones, it signaled liberation, the chance to define their own industrial destiny. No empire lasts forever, and energy empires fall faster than most. As the last rigs left, new ones rose under different flags. Contracts were written in new languages, and the world kept turning, but on a new axis. Yet this is not a story of isolation. Partnerships continue, but on different terms. Technology, clean energy, and innovation are shared, yet the balance of power has shifted. The decline of one oil empire is not merely the collapse of a business model, it marks the rise of a continent learning to use its wealth its own way, from the dusty oil fields to the modern ports. A quiet revolution has unfolded. The vacuum left behind was quickly filled not with dependence but with determination. Pipelines still flow, markets still move, but the rules are no longer written by a single hand. The global energy map has been redrawn, and at its center stands a new declaration, unwritten but understood by all. This time, the terms are ours. In the span of a single generation, the world's energy map has been rewritten. What was once a one-way relationship, resources flowing out, profits flowing in, has transformed into a complex web of new partnerships and ambitions. The old order, built on dependency and distance, has given way to a new reality. A reality where producers and consumers trade as equals, where influence is earned, not imposed. Across the global south, a quiet confidence is growing. Nations that once waited for opportunities are now creating their own. They are building refineries, training their own scientists, and investing in energy futures that go beyond oil. For them, this moment is not merely about profits, it is about power, dignity, and self-determination. The decline of one empire's dominance was never a sudden collapse. It was a gradual shift, 1,000 small decisions that redirected the flow of history. Each trade deal, each new alliance, each refinery built under a new flag pushed the world a little further from its old center of gravity. And now that center has moved. This is not a story of loss. It is a story of transformation. One era ends, another begins. Where one soil was a symbol of control, it is now a symbol of connection, a resource that binds continents together through trade, technology, and shared necessity. But there is a deeper lesson hidden beneath the surface. Power is never permanent. It shifts with innovation, with ambition, and with time. Those who fail to adapt are left behind, not by rivals, but by progress itself. The world's new energy landscape is no longer drawn in the boardrooms of a single nation. It is written in the policies of dozens, in the aspirations of billions, and in the quiet hum of new industries. Being born, the continent that once supplied the world is now shaping it, and in every barrel, every watt, every new deal signed on its soil, there echoes the same unspoken truth: the era of extraction is over. The era of ownership has begun. Oil built empires. Now it's building independence. The future of energy will not belong to those who once ruled the market, but to those who dare to redefine it.